The ceremony was scheduled to begin at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and by 3:57 everything was perfect. That is the word the wedding coordinator, a composed and experienced woman named Diane, who had orchestrated 214 weddings over 19 years, used when she did her final walkthrough of the Hargrove Estate barn venue at 3:56. Perfect, she said it quietly to herself, not to anyone in particular. The way a person says something when they want the universe to hear it as a statement of fact rather than a challenge. The Edison bulb strands were lit and warm above the rows of white wooden chairs. The wildflower arrangements on the aisle posts were exactly what Emma had described in her vision board 8 months ago, loose and unstructured, like flowers that had simply decided to grow there. The string quartet in the corner was playing something soft and unhurried. The late October light came through the barn's high windows at the precise golden angle that photographers spend entire careers trying to recreate artificially. Diane had spoken too soon. At 4:01, as the first guests were settling, as the groomsmen were taking their positions, as the officiant, a kind-faced man named Reverend Paul Whitmore, who had known the groom's family for 20 years, was smoothing the front of his vestments and reviewing his notes for the final time, the power went out. Not a flicker, not a brief interruption that resolves itself in 3 seconds and gives everyone a mild, collective fright. A complete, total, immediate darkness, and the Edison bulbs gone, the wireless microphone system dead, the speakers through which the processional music was meant to play reduced to silent, black rectangles, and the late October light through the high windows suddenly revealed as the only illumination in the entire barn, which in the first moment of shock seemed like very little light at all, and then, as eyes adjusted, revealed itself to be something else entirely. In the bridal suite at the back of the property, a converted cottage, warm and crowded with bridesmaids and a makeup artist named Cleo who was mid-finishing Emma's hair when the lights went, the reaction was immediate. 2 of the bridesmaids went for their phones. Cleo, who had worked in enough high-pressure environments to know that panic is contagious and composure is a professional responsibility, said nothing and continued what she was doing with Emma's hair, which was almost finished anyway. Emma Barrett did not panic. She was 29 years old, a Caucasian woman from a small town in western North Carolina, with the particular combination of qualities that people who knew her well described with the same words regardless of how long they'd known her. Steady, warm, funny, in a way that sneaked up on you. She had dark blonde hair that Cleo had woven into something loose and romantic, and gray-green eyes that her mother had always called sea glass eyes, and the kind of beauty that was not the first thing you noticed about her but became, over time, the thing you couldn't stop noticing. She was wearing a simple ivory dress, no train, no cathedral veil, no architectural boning, just clean ivory silk that moved when she moved, with a neckline that fell from her shoulders in a soft V that her mother had described, when Emma had first tried it on, as exactly right. She sat in the bridal suite in the new low, golden light of the October afternoon coming through the cottage windows, and she was quiet for a moment while everyone around her reoriented. Then she said to the room in general, "Is James okay? Not, what about the music? Not, what about the microphones? The vows, the coordination, the 214 wedding comparison, against which this one was now being measured." Her first and only question was whether the man waiting for her in the barn was okay. One of the bridesmaids, her closest friend from college, a woman named Brooke, who knew Emma well enough to not be surprised by this but loved her enough to still be moved by it, went to find out. In the barn, James Calloway was okay. He was 31 years old, Caucasian, lean and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and the kind of face that looked most itself when it was listening to something, and attentive and open, the specific expression of a man who is genuinely interested in what is being said to him, which was one of the first things Emma had noticed when they had met 4 years ago at a mutual friend's dinner party, and he had listened to a story she was telling a group of people with the focused attention of someone hearing something important, rather than waiting for his turn to talk. He was standing at the front of the barn in his dark navy suit. He had refused the morning coat that his mother had gently advocated for, and had been right to refuse it. It would have been wrong for him. And when the lights went out, he stood in the sudden dimness and looked around the barn and then at Reverend Whitmore, and then at his best man, his younger brother Connor, who was already pulling out his phone, flashlight with the instinctive practicality of a person whose first response to any problem is immediate action. "Leave the phone," James said. Connor looked at him. "Just leave it," James said. "Look at the light." Connor looked. Others looked. And what they saw now that the artificial warmth of the Edison bulbs was gone and the eyes had adjusted, and the late October sun was doing what late October suns do at 4 in the afternoon in western North Carolina, and what they saw was that the barn was not dark at all. The high windows ran along both sides of the barn's upper wall, and through them came the particular low amber light of an October afternoon that had no interest in being subtle, that came in at an angle, that made the dust motes visible and the wildflower arrangements glow from within, and turned the white wooden chairs and the faces of the waiting guests into something that looked considerably more like a painting than a wedding venue. Diane, to her very great credit, assessed the situation in approximately 30 seconds and made a decision. She went to the string quartet, who had stopped playing when the power went out and were looking at each other in the dim, amber light with the particular uncertainty of musicians without a stage manager. She said quietly, "Can you play something acoustic? Something real? Don't stop until I tell you." The quartet looked at each other again. The cellist, a young woman named Rachel, who had been playing since she was 6, put her bow to her strings and started something she knew from memory. The others joined. What came out was not the processional that had been programmed into the speaker system. It was something older, something slower, something that did not have a wedding industry category, but that filled the barn in the amber light the way the Edison bulbs could not have, with sound that was entirely human, that had breath in it, that was made by people sitting 6 feet away rather than projected from boxes on stands. The guests went still, not the polite stillness of people waiting for a program to resume, the other kind. Brooke came back to the bridal suite and told Emma that James was fine and that the barn was. She paused, searching for the word. "You need to see it," she finally said. Emma stood. She took her small bouquet from the table. She looked at herself in the mirror for one moment, not the checking look, not the last-minute assessment look, but the look a person gives themselves when they are about to do something that matters and they want to be present for it. Then she turned from the mirror. She walked to the barn with no rehearsed pause, no coordinator cueing her entrance, no processional announcement over a microphone, no one managing the moment. She walked through the barn doors and stopped. The amber light, the music that had breath in it, 200 faces turning toward her, all of them wearing the expression that is unique to weddings and births, and certain sunsets, the expression of people who have been reminded, without asking to be reminded of what matters. She saw James at the front of the barn. He saw her in the same moment. His face did the thing it did when he was listening to something important, open and still and entirely present. Except that this time it did something else too. Something she had not seen before, which was that his eyes filled immediately and completely, with no pretense and no management. The way eyes fill when something arrives that is simply too right to receive any other way. She walked down the aisle. No music cue, no timing. Just her footsteps on the barn floor and the string quartet playing something. True in the October, light making everything amber and real. Her father, a quiet and steady man named Robert, who was not a crier and had told her so at breakfast, that morning in the tone of a man making a promise to himself, was crying by the time she reached him at the third row. He took her arm and walked her the rest of the way and said nothing, because nothing was required. James took her hands. Reverend Whitmore had no microphone. He looked at the assembled guests and simply spoke louder, and because the barn was quiet, and the light was amber and the string quartet had faded to something underneath, everyone heard him clearly. There is something about a human voice in a large space, unamplified, that commands attention differently than a projected one. It asks more of the listener and is somehow, for that reason, more fully received. The vows were next. James had written his. He had been writing them for 3 months, which Emma knew because she had found 3 discarded drafts in the recycling bin in his home office over the past months, and had read none of them, not one word, because she wanted to hear them for the first time when they were meant to be heard. He held her hands and looked at her in the amber barn light, and he said, without notes, without the paper he had carried in his jacket pocket and now did not reach for, that she was the person who had made him understand the difference between being in a room and being present in it. That before her he had been in many rooms, that since her he had been present, that he intended to spend the rest of his life being present to her, with her in every ordinary room and every extraordinary one and every amber-lit barn that lost its power at the wrong moment, or, as he now understood it, the exactly right one. 200 people in white wooden chairs heard every word. Emma's vows were shorter. She had written 2 pages and reduced them over months to 4 sentences, a process of removal that was its own kind of devotion, the way the best things are often arrived at by taking away rather than adding. She said that she had spent most of her life being afraid of exactly this, of wanting something this much, of being this certain. She said that he had made certainty feel like coming home rather than like risk, and she said, and this was the sentence that produced the sound that went through the barn, the collective soft exhale of 200 people receiving something true simultaneously. She said that if the power went out every year on this day for the rest of their lives, she would consider it a gift, because nothing that had ever been planned had been as beautiful as what was happening right now, in this light with him. Reverend Whitmore, who had been officiating weddings for 22 years and had developed the professional composure that experience provides, cleared his throat once before continuing. The rings were exchanged in the amber light. The pronouncement was made into the warm acoustic air of a barn full of people who were not looking at their phones. The kiss was the kind that gets a sound from a crowd, not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. The specific truth of 2 people who are exactly where they are supposed to be, doing exactly what they are supposed to be doing, without performance and without management and without the Edison bulbs that were, as it turned out, never necessary. The power came back on 7 minutes later. The Edison bulbs returned. The speakers crackled to life. The programmed reception playlist began automatically from wherever it had stopped. Nobody cheered for the lights. The reception ran long, the way receptions run when people are genuinely reluctant to leave. At the end of the evening, when the guests were gone and the caterers were clearing, and the string quartet had packed their cases, James and Emma stood in the empty barn in the full electric light of the Edison bulbs. Emma looked up at the strands. Then she looked at James. "The lights are prettier when they're all that's left," she said.
James looked up too.
Then back at her. "I thought the other light was better," he said. She thought about it. "The other light was honest," she said finally. "This is pretty. There's a difference." James Calloway looked at his wife of 4 hours and 17 minutes, in the full Edison light of the barn where they had gotten married, and thought that he had just heard, in 2 sentences, the reason he was going to be interested in what she said for the rest of his life. They turned off the lights when they left. In the dark, the barn was amber again, just the moonlight through the high windows now, the same windows that had saved the ceremony and made it true. Diane locked the doors behind them and stood for a moment before going to her car, looking back at the barn in the dark, and thought about the word she had used at 3:56. She had called it perfect. She had been right, just not yet.